Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I have the unique pleasure of being able to welcome Carolyn Blasko from Student Matters LLC. She is an educational advocate who really focuses on productivity, authenticity, and clarity. And her business has been in operation since 2012. And she brought it into the forefront because of some concerns she had about the public education system and being able to service people with diverse needs. And Carolyn was an educator prior to this. So, Carolyn, welcome. Thank you so much for having us and for coming in today.
Honored to be here. Thank you.
So let's chat about because Carolyn, you end up working with so many school districts, more than 44 that you've worked with. And I know there's way more than that, but you work with so many families and so many schools at really trying to bridge that gap when they come to an impasse. And
Mhm.
what are you seeing as the big changes in the educational system in the last like about 4 to 5 years? What are the current
Mhm.
stressors that are occurring that is impacting students and staff and families?
Yeah, the biggest changes I'm seeing are, I'm sure many are observing, there is an increase, it would appear there's an increase in social anxiety and attendance challenges.
Yeah.
I'm brought to reflect on, way back when IDEA was put in place, the Individuals for Disabilities Education Act, nobody knew back then. There was no way anyone could have known how things were going to unfold, that we have so much more research now about students' needs. We have so much more information. There's a host of mental illnesses. Nobody knew about what we know now about trauma, about social anxiety, about generalized anxiety, ADHD, how autism presents on a spectrum, executive functioning skills, all the language-based needs associated with dyslexia. There's an identification in education called OHI for other health impaired, for there's medical needs if they affect the student's learning. So there's just so much that now I'm sure feels like the needs of the special education world can feel so heavy and so daunting to us now. Um, and we just have to kind of readjust our thinking uh, to kind of adjust for that. I feel like sometimes the schools don't get rewarded for efforts at efficiency
Yeah.
because justifiably so, the parents have been given this set of regulations that's named special education. That's the language that's been given to us. So they come to the process with this expectation of, well, you're going to be doing something special and uniquely, distinctly different for my kid than everybody else, because that's what the regulation requires, and they're not wrong. And yet, from the school's perspective, they can say, well, look, we've got 8 students in this classroom who have some same or very similar needs. Or perhaps we think every second grader needs a lot of sensory breaks or needs some extra time to get this done. So they would say, look, some of these things that you want us to consider special education, we just think are good practice for everybody. And they're not wrong
Not
about
at
that, too.
all. Yeah.
No.
And being an educator
So,
nowadays, you need so many more skills and it really encompasses so many things. And there's so many strategies to address the concerns that are going on nowadays. And
mhm,
that's really what I'm hitting on in my book is that, the old techniques, they're great. They work for a
right,
small percentage of the population, but we
right.
need to address the learners that are struggling that those techniques don't work for.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I'm also brought to think, I love you're thinking about the pain in, it's sad to imagine pain associated with the school experience. And yet the reality is it's not just pain for students that we want to spare, but pain for parents and teachers too. We
100%.
all,
Yeah.
no matter what our age, we're all humans,
Yeah.
and we all have acquired a lot of experiences in life school,
Yeah.
and they're impacting the way we come to the process and we come to work. I work with scenarios where, for example, the parent feels a parent with dyslexia themselves, for example, is invited as they should be, and to be participating in that annual education plan development. But to just to have to sit there at a table with 12 other educators in a conference room by yourself, all of a sudden this very well-adjusted, successful adult feels like an 8-year-old all over again, being reprimanded and in the principal's office just by the very nature of just the
The
way this
meeting set up.
the way it, and it's not intentional, it's
Not at
not the
all.
way
It's
nobody
really meant to,
means for it
let's
to
all
feel like
communicate as a group. And
that.
it ends up being,
Yeah,
giving them this experience that's challenging. And you know that
right.
we see this over and over again. I work with so many students. You work with so many students and families where the parents have gone through experiences that have really set them up to have a challenging time. And
Mhm.
that sets up the student to have a challenging time. And then unfortunately, then we're creating that scenario for the educators too. So, pain often brings them to our door, so
Yeah.
your door to my door. And it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
this painful. I know, Carolyn, you oftentimes
Mhm.
you're working with people that you say, my gosh, I wish they'd come to me 3 years ago. We could have made this so much less painful.
I
And
have parents that say that to me. Say, boy, I wish I called you earlier.
yeah, yep. And I'm in in the similar scenario where I
I'm
don't
sure.
students until they usually get to tier 3 status or something like that. And, gosh, if we could just give more strategies and techniques, which is what we're trying to do, so
Mhm.
that they don't have to get to that point, that would be huge, just
Right.
huge. I will say that oftentimes when I'm working with families, educators, and students, the biggest thing that they seem to have challenges with is that they just don't feel safe. They don't feel safe in the school environment. They don't feel safe working with professionals that are assisting them. And sometimes that goes back to their own trauma histories. And sometimes it's from the current situation that they're going through. So, what have you seen as techniques for safety that you feel have been successful for the families and the youth that you've been in contact with?
Certainly just some transparent and sometimes vulnerable conversation about what will help someone to feel safe. Because it's a really sorrowful scenario when you learn of unintended messages that are not so many times when you break it all down, you learn that nobody was intending for anyone to experience what they were experiencing. But when you sit down and listen and go, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. Now I can see how for you this experience must be very troubling.
Absolutely.
Certainly, being very responsive to any reports of being mistreated by anybody is very, very important. By other, our children are children, and they behave like children sometimes, and yet each student needs to be treated with kindness, and even what can feel so benign or, oh, they're just being kids kind of thing does need to be um, treated with seriousness. That, look, this is happening. I know it looks like the student is holding it together during the school day, but at home we're seeing that that's not the case, and that this is really troublesome.
It is. And people often say, how come that is? Someone said
Mm,
to you,
mm,
gosh,
mm.
when you were a second grader, you really don't have a head for math. And then for the rest of your life, you thought that math wasn't, the thing for you. But there's a reason for that. As our brains develop, I mean, we are operating in a part of in our brain waves that are going on at that time with that age is typically what's called the theta brainwave. We are very suggestible. We're very able to make believe and do things like that. And that's why kids can play make believe for hours. You ask an adult to pretend they're a dog, they'll sit there and say, and then are we done?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, they don't want to be in that brainwave. They want to be in alpha and beta and those sorts of things so that they have more control and they can feel more like I can control this. Children don't tend to have that need. They can live in that pretend world, but because of that, they're super suggestible. So those
Mm.
her can be much more impactful on them from a life process. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really important for people to remember because they come to us with their little identities, even oftentimes almost set by the time they're 5 and 6 and 7 years old. And if we're reaffirming that and that identity is not serving them, then that can be very traumatizing for them as they get older. And
Mm-hmm.
for no fault of anyone's, but
Correct.
I just happened to mention that this isn't your thing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Set them up for a lifelong of I'm not a writer, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a
Yeah.
this, or I am too much of that. And
Yeah.
you're exactly what you should be. You're exactly
Yeah.
who you need to be and who you are. And we appreciate that for all the aspects of you. So,
Yes.
but that's tough sometimes, I think, for people to wrap their heads around. They're
Sure.
well-meaning, but sometimes
Sure.
it comes off and in a way
And
that
understandably, any teacher, like I taught for 9 years myself, as you referred to, and there can be for the school employee, there can be this even the most dedicated, as you said, well-intending person, it still is, it's a job where it's a job. And their job is to get through this lesson, get through this unit, get through this chapter, get through this semester, and my work here is done. But the parents do tend to come from far more of a long game, mentality of, look, we're building in the student the skills that they need for a lifetime. And that long game is far more important than getting through, you know, this semester kind of thing. They don't want to just kind of be told, well, they did it okay. They want to know that we're really legitimately learning some skills that they're going to be able to carry with them beyond this classroom. Um, and you're right, every one of these experiences that every student is having, they are carrying with them to the next experience. And that can be hard for all of us to remember.
that can create a source of conflict between the educators and the families, right, Carolyn? And how do you help them navigate that?
Sure. Well, I think acknowledging it. Um, I hear a lot of, well, the single greatest message I hear from parents that hire me is just, I'm just so glad to not be here alone anymore, to have somebody else to validate what I feel like I'm experiencing. Um, and surprisingly, I actually get the same thank yous from a lot of schools that say, thank you so much for being here and helping us facilitate this conversation.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of health in that conversation.
And I will say, as a little testimonial for Carolyn, Carolyn and I have worked together in the past in a
Yeah,
number of situations in schools. And it's,
yeah.
for me, always been a wonderful experience.
Mm.
And I have to say, too, for the students, it's always been a really great experience. And I've always had the schools be very thankful for that experience afterwards because it gives them a different perspective of how to view things. And the parents, I know how the parents feel because I've worked with those families, and they're extremely grateful that they have someone to bounce some ideas off of. They have someone to help them formulate a plan that's going to be best for their child, and help to look at things a different way because sometimes we get caught up in it should go like this and then we should do that and so on and so forth, and every person's unique and we have to be able to think a little bit out of the box and create a situation that's going to work for that person, and not every situation is the same.
Yes, and I think that's the favorite part about my job that I love, is that it is so unique and different with every scenario.
Mine too.
But those old principles that we all know they hold true in every situation, of that every person wants to be heard and wants to be valued. And there's some more care being given now to including students themselves in those meetings and including them in the process. And so it's just really of high value. I would not dismiss for a minute the value of including every person's voice, the math teacher and the student and the parent and the administrator, like every single person's perspective does matter. And they do bring something beneficial to the process. And when it's all working in a healthy way, it can be a really beautiful thing.
It really can. It really can.
Mhm.
And don't ever underestimate asking the youth what can work.
Mhm.
Sometimes their ideas aren't going to
Mhm.
be ones that actually
Mhm.
work, but
Mhm.
sometimes they have some wonderful
Mhm.
ideas. I mean, I've had students who have given me ideas as far as how to structure a classroom,
Mhm.
how like what sorts of tools they feel they need, and some great ideas on how to do those things. I've also had some that just say, I just need video games and it will be fine. I need that as my break. And I'm like, no,
Uh-huh.
want, not what you need.
Mhm.
It's a difference. Let's back up. But
Mhm.
they can have some wonderful ideas and really help with those things. In addition to the safety, Carolyn, what do you see as being the big things that help to regulate? Because I do know that your families are nervous when they go into these meetings. Oftentimes, the educators are nervous when they go into these meetings. So,
Mhm.
what are some things that you feel are really beneficial to them at those times?
Yeah, I come to this from my role as an advocate. I come to this of thinking about managing the pain of that part of the experience of the procedures of the special education world. Some simple game changers that I would suggest off the top that all parents and teachers can apply these skills that cost you not a dime and you can do them right now is one. I'm the minority in this culturally, but I suggest to for one, show up at the meeting. Zoom here has provided for us all kinds of new opportunities, and it is appropriate in a lot of settings. But again, I'm the minority in my field on this, but I encourage people to not use that as their default. I really encourage them to, if you want to convey to your school that you are an invested person, drive across town to your local school where your student attends 6.5 hours a day and be there in the building. And I have had some powerful experiences where, um, for example, a student was experiencing a lot of social anxiety about attending school. And when we got right down to it, we learned that, to be honest, the parent had a lot of social anxiety about stepping foot in that building. And so that was very telling about, well, maybe we all together ought to do some work here about the simplicity and the power of simply coming to the meeting and
Absolutely.
being there together. Now, again, it's not every time, it doesn't always work out, it's not possible, but there is value in that. And
Huge
then just,
face-to-face
yeah,
contact. There's a huge difference between seeing people
absolutely.
face-to-face, the energy that you can receive, not that you can't receive it in other ways and through this.
Yes.
There is a huge difference between going to something. I love training live. I love to do professional development live. And it, for me, that really fills me because I can sense off the energy what the people need, what type of learning they need to have at that time. And it's harder to do when you're virtual.
Mm-hmm.
Truly.
Absolutely. So there is a
So
place
that's
for it.
great.
It does. We live in a world where we have options, and it's great to have these options. But I really encourage people to be there. And then I even, again, this is something else unique to how I work. And anyone who's been to meetings with me would say they might remember this about me, that I encourage you to sit in a different chair, different times when you go. And I think it's very fascinating. So I bet in your work, this probably resonates with you, that there are similarities in kind of the territorial behaviors of animals and humans.
Yeah.
And I can see how sometimes simply by occupying a different chair than what you normally do, you've kind of taken a different position. You're literally positioning your body in a way that says, look, I'm not cemented in to one viewpoint here. And it also can beautifully convey to the school that, look, it's not like it's your side and my side. There is no side. I'm sitting right beside you. It's all of us. We're all here. We all catch ourselves. I'm sure that I've slipped up in this conversation. We all will say we, us, and them. And we have to remind ourselves that, well, actually, it's all of us, together to think about that. And then another thing I think is really important is to know why you're there. There's something called a 10-day meeting notice that's supposed to go to families before the meeting. And since the pandemic, since we've all gone to Zoom, it's been very easy to slide over into sending these calendar links and these Google, links. But something that gets missed there sometimes is the purpose of the meeting and the role of everybody who's there. And I've been to meetings where everyone's gathered and then they realize to review an evaluation, for example, and then they realize we don't have a school psychologist here to review it, so we're going to have to reconvene. And those kind of things can be, you can get ahead of that and have a proper meeting notice sent so that everybody knows who's here, what are they here for, and why are we here, and get this organized in advance. And it's just far more honoring of everybody's time. And then another really novel thing that I do that I'm sure makes some of my special education attorney colleagues would cringe, but I really value this, that I send thank you notes. I send thank you notes,
I
the
love
old
that.
fashioned kind. The old fashioned kind, I just send thank you notes, and but every once in a while at the end of a week, I might just reflect on a week and just send a kind thank you note to somebody who struck me as someone who came to the process engaged and competent and authentic. And I think that no matter what anybody's role is, we're all humans and we all like to be valued and appreciated. And there is a way that you can extend gratitude without in any way compromising your legal position on something. There is a way that you can do that with kindness and authenticity and still honor protecting your position, if you want to say that way for your child. And then the genuine task of just plain listening, for goodness sakes. It's one thing to kind of sit in silence while you allow someone else to talk, while you're internally kind of reloading your own slingshot. And it's another thing to put that all aside and really, really listen and listen to each other. And every once in a while, we can all find ourselves surprised that somebody at the table might have a pretty darn good idea
Oh,
that we wouldn't have given space for mentally if had we not really just listen and see what those ideas are. So those are some of the things that come to me right away. And I especially think about the listening when I think about when we are including students in this process. Well, gosh, we sure do want to be modeling for our students how we problem solve together and how we listen to each other. Talk about social skills instruction. There's a lot of social skills instruction that's right built into the process. So
absolutely.
it's baked in, while we're sitting right there talking about the education plan, we're actually engaging in education
Yeah.
right then and there. This is it.
Lifelong education, 100%. Yeah. Because they need to work through it. Those are great, Carolyn. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing that. Those are excellent tips. I really think that they're super helpful for our community as well as for everybody at large. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Just that I'm so very impressed every day with all the work that I see being done everywhere. There's a lot of people tackling what seems like an impossible task every day, and yet we all still get up every day and do it. And it really is remarkable.
It
I'm
is.
very, very grateful for your work and
Thank you.
that you're able to convey to so many different audiences, whatever the person's role is in the process, convey to them the value of listening to each other and learning from each other, because we all have a lot to learn.
We really do. We really do. And every day when I'm surprised by something, I'm always like, that's a good day.
Yeah.
So thankful for today because for me it's really about learning and having those little points of change that occur in everything because that's what helps us grow and helps us become better and provide better opportunities and services to those that we're working with. So thank you everyone so much. I appreciate you all joining us today. Carolyn, thank you again. It was great to see you. I will put Carolyn's contact information below so you can reach out to her if you feel that you need some support. Thanks again.